So you want to learn more about the rocks, huh? No, not that rock. No, not multiples of that rock. I'm talking about the Rocks AVA, the Rocks District of Milton Free Water AVA. Yes, those rocks. Although Dwayne Johnson is an absolute beast. I mean, what can the guy not do? Wrestle, act, sing? Did you hear him sing in Moana? Yeah, Dwayne Johnson is an absolute beast. But anyways, we're going to be talking about the Rocks District AVA today. Where is it? What does it do to grapes? And what do the wines look like that are coming out of this area? Let's get started. So I've gotten tons of people requesting a video about the rocks. Probably the first one was Ben in St. Louis, who was browsing on the website, and he said, these rocks are amazing. I need to try some of these wines. What do they do? How does it relate to winemaking and grape growing? And then how does it taste in the glass? So we're gonna break it down here. So first off, the Rocks District of Milton Free Water is the official name of the AVA. However, most people just say the Rocks AVA. And I'm going to dive a little bit into what an AVA is. AVA stands for American Viticultural Area. And basically what it is it's a delineated area that says, if you grow your grapes in this area, then you can say the grapes are from that area. Now I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but it does make sense where it's people in, I don't know, New York can't be growing grapes and saying, hey, these grapes are from Napa. That doesn't make any sense, right? Napa's on the other side of the country. It's in California. But then what is in Napa and what is out of Napa? There has to be some sort of boundary. Napa, it doesn't take up the entire state of California. So there has to be some sort of border, some sort of boundary that shows if you grow your grapes in this region, you can say they're from this region. And if you grow them outside the region, then you can't. Makes sense. Quick little fact, the first AVA of America was in 1980, and it was Augusta, Missouri, from close by my hometown. The second one was the one I was just talking about, Napa Valley. They were second in 1981. Second point on AVAs is you can have AVAs that are nested inside of other AVAs. So in Washington, for example, Columbia Valley is a very big AVA. It takes up a lot of the space, almost half the state. However, within Columbia Valley, there are nested AVAs like Walla Walla or Yakima or Red Mountain. Those are all AVAs inside of Columbia Valley. And then you can have an AVA nested inside of that. So the rocks that we're going to talk about today is an AVA that is nested inside of the Walla Walla Valley AVA. So Walla Walla became an AVA in 1984. The rocks just became an AVA in 2015. So you can see how new the Rocks AVA is compared to Walla Walla AVA. And how AVAs are determined or based are on a number of factors, but they're mostly agricultural factors. Things like rainfall, things like soil types, things like precipitation, growing degree days, heat units, things like that. That is what mostly determines an AVA. Because the Walla Walla AVA is in Washington and Oregon. A bit of it stretches down into Oregon because we just drew this line and said, hey, this is Washington and Oregon, but the soil is the same on both sides, right? It gets the same amount of sunlight on both sides, right? It gets the same amount of heat units on both sides. Precipitation is very, very similar. So when we look at AVAs, we're looking at it more of a growing condition region versus the actual state that it's in. So as I said earlier, the Rocks is an AVA nested inside of the Walla Walla AVA, and the Rocks is 100% in Oregon, but still within the Walla Walla AVA. The Rocks is a little under 6 square miles, which makes it one of the smallest AVAs in America. A lot of times when people see pictures of the rocks, they're like, how in the heck did all those rocks get there? Well, let me explain. And I can promise you nobody put them there. That would be next to impossible. What happened was the Walla Walla River used to flow one way coming out of the Blue Mountains. And it flowed with a ton of velocity. So it was carrying all of these stones from up in the Blue Mountains. Well, right at the town of Milton Free Water, it kind of flattens out. And so as the water was rushing through the corridor in the Blue Mountains, as it got to the town of Milton Free Water, it just kind of opened up and the water lost a lot of its velocity. So it just dumped these stones that it was carrying onto this flat plain. It's called an alluvial fan because what happens is as the water loses its velocity, it just starts dumping these stones and dumping these stones and dumping these stones. Well, then the water behind it keeps hitting these stones and hitting these stones, and it slowly changes the course of the river because it keeps hitting the more and more rocks, more and more stones as it's dumping more, and it dumps them and then it fans all the way across. So what this area is called is an alluvial fan because the river goes like this, and it swings into a whole new course, which is exactly what happened with the Walla Walla River. So thousands and thousands of years ago, the river used to flow one way, now it flows another way, and it dumped all of these stones in the middle. At the highest point of the rocks, which we call the apex or the highest point, the elevation is around 1,000 feet, and the stones and the rocks are a lot bigger than at the lowest part, which is further down from the Blue Mountains, from where the corridor opened up. This is because as the water lost velocity, it couldn't carry those big stones anymore. It could carry some more smaller stones, but it just didn't have the energy to carry the big stones. So it dumped the big stones first at what we would call the apex, and then it fans out and the rocks get smaller and smaller and smaller and wider and further out. So the highest point is around 1,000 feet and the lowest point is around 800 feet of the Rocks AVA. If you're familiar with Walla Walla, you might have visited some wineries up in like what we call Mill Creek. Some of those are around like 1,500 feet, so 500 to 700 feet higher than the Rocks AVA. Downtown Walla Walla is around 1,000 to 1,100 feet, and the airport is like 1,150 feet elevation. So it's kind of this gradual slope from the airport to downtown all the way down to the rocks. So a lot of times in the Walla Walla Valley, we would say down in the rocks because it's at a low spot in elevation. So a couple things about low spots with elevation. Generally, those aren't great for viticulture because, as we all know, hot air rises, cold air sinks. So those low spots will get cooler than the high spots. The hot air rises. Now, as hot air rises, gets really, really high, then it starts to cool off. But with that short distance, the hot air will rise and the cold air will sink. So even though the Rocks is at a low spot in the Walla Walla Valley, it's still one of the hotter spots because of all of those rocks. Those rocks hold on to heat, they radiate that heat to the root zone and also to the fruit above. So we'll get bud break, one of the first milestones in the growing season, down in the rocks before most other spots throughout the valley because those rocks warm up so quick and they warm up the roots. And bud break usually happens around when soil temperatures get to about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when bud break starts to happen. So that'll happen first on the rocks, then throughout the rest of the Walla Walla Valley. A lot of people want to know, how deep do these rocks go? I was talking to a vineyard manager last fall who they put in a well for irrigation, and he said they dug down 250 feet and they were still pulling out big old stones at that rate. They're still pulling out big rocks. Now, just to be clear, it's not like it's those giant stones all the way down. There is smaller particles and smaller subsoil in there. The best way I can explain this is if you get like a jar of all different sizes of just marbles or something. Usually the small ones kind of fall down to the bottom and the bigger ones kind of stay up top. That's kind of what happens here in the rocks. Plus we're constantly cultivating the land. We're constantly, dragging a cultivator through and bringing those rocks back up. So it's kind of like that. It's almost like the small particles do fall down. There's more paths that they can take, where the big rocks, they have nowhere to go. They have to kind of like hang out on top. So again, there are smaller particles there. There's other soil that's there that the roots need. And this is another big characteristic of the rocks, is what's the soil type like? Because the nutrients in the soil are different than anywhere else in the Walla Walla Valley. They're very high in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The big one is potassium. The fruit that comes out of the rocks has very high level of potassium versus fruit that comes through from the rest of the Walla Walla Valley. And some speculate that is where we get some of the earthy, some of the savory, some of the meaty aromas that come from those wines from the rocks, is all that high level of potassium. I don't know if that's scientifically proven yet. There's still a lot of ongoing research to determine what's actually happening in the rocks. All we know is that it does a great job of giving wines that come from there a little bit more of a kind of a characteristic that tends to be more earthy, savory, meaty, peppery, and smoky. So what grape varieties grow down in the rocks? There's no real right answer here. I think tried and true is Syrah. Syrah has been well established in the rocks and it does great with the rocks. For a couple reasons. Syrah is an early ripener, so it ripens early in the season, usually around early October, late September, early October, we can start harvesting Syrah because it's ripe. And as I was saying earlier, the rocks heat up very early in the spring, but then they cool off quickly in the fall. It's almost like the opposite, because the soil then also cools off quickly in the fall. So what works really well is some early ripeners like Syrah or Tempranillo. You can grow Cabernet and Petit Verdot, but they might struggle to get ripe because the heat units really start to tail off during the fall. Again, they warm up really quick in the spring, the rocks do, but then they cool off very quick in the fall. So it kind of has a little bit of a different effect to the grapes. But again, no real right answer there. You can farm and grow anything probably in the rocks. You just have to farm it specifically for what you're dealing with in the rocks. But again, I think tried and true, what's well known from the rocks is Syrah. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, there's great Cabernet coming from the rocks. Cab Franc is another great one. Had some good Chardonnay from the rocks. Viognier seems to be killer. Probably grow anything and make anything down there, and it's gonna be fantastic stuff. So basic viticulture 101, what you really wanna do is stress your plant, stress your vine, because then the vine puts a lot of energy into making high quality fruit. And the Rocks AVA does this for us perfectly. You wanna talk about a stressful environment, go down to the rocks. That's where vines really, really struggle. They get very stressed out and therefore produce amazing, amazing fruit. Basically, the vine's like, this place sucks, get me the heck out of here, so I'm gonna put all my energy into my fruit because I'm getting the heck out of here. We need to reproduce and go elsewhere. That's kind of how the vine's thinking in a stressful environment. Because basically all a vine is programmed to do is make really good fruit. Hopefully a bird comes and eats it, and then the bird flies away and, poops out the seed. The seed falls and grows somewhere else. That's basically what a vine is meant to do. So when the vine is very, very stressed, it produces the best fruit to try to attract the birds or the animals or what have you. If it's not that stressed out, if it's in kind of a happy environment, it doesn't really have to work that hard to put out, amazing fruit. That's why winemakers and viticulturists all the time are talking about stressing the vine to therefore get the best quality fruit. And like I said earlier, the Rocks does that for us easily. So that's gonna kind of cover the Rocks AVA. More questions, let me know. Hopefully that's a high level overview of what the Rocks does, where it is, and what it looks like in terms of winemaking. Now we're gonna dive into our moon fact. The moon fact for today is that there is no dark side of the moon. This one always drives me crazy. We're so self-centered. We say that the back side of the moon is the dark side of the moon because we never see it. But that doesn't, it's not that it's always dark. That doesn't make any sense. Anytime there's a new moon, basically where there's the sun and then the moon and then us, when there's a new moon, the backside of the moon is fully lit. It's just like a full moon. Because basically, let's say here's the sun, here's us. If the moon's right here, we're not gonna see any of it because the light's hitting the backside. But if it goes sun, us, moon, then we see a full moon because the light's shining past Earth and hitting the moon. So yeah, there's no dark side of the moon, okay? The moon gets 100% light throughout its orbit. Every inch of it gets covered in light. Except maybe the South Pole. Yeah, I think I remember like the South Pole, there's like maybe some water trapped under there because the sun has never really hit it, but I don't know. Because we have images of the far side of the moon. That's the proper way to say it, the far side of the moon, not the dark side of the moon. But yeah, we have images of the far side of the moon perfectly lit up by the sun. So clearly it wasn't dark. However, whenever that photo was taken, it was dark to us on Earth. We wouldn't have been able to see it because it was totally, blacked out because of the sun, and we would only be able to see the dark side facing us. The far side would have been lit up at that time 100%. The side facing us would have been lit up 0% because we just couldn't see it. It's almost like if you hold a basketball, you're never gonna be able to see the entire basketball. You can only see the side that you're looking at. So that's gonna do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Rocks. There may be more questions or more comments. Please, there's always 3 ways to get in touch with me. The comment field below. You can always drop us an email, that's down in the footer, or this little box over here that usually sends a text to us too. If you got any more questions about the Rocks, the wines coming out of the Rocks, anything in regard to that, this video was meant to be kind of a high level overview of the Rocks AVA. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and hope you enjoy all the other videos. Kind of check around at some of the other ones. These are exclusively for Wine Club members, kind of a perk as being a Wine Club member. So thanks again. Keep drinking wine and keep looking up. Have a good day. Some speculate that is what gives the wines coming out of the Rocks a little bit more of an earthy, savory, meaty, pepper